It means unlocking the full potential of individuals, people within companies, to help businesses achieve what they want to achieve. And for me, human resources at its core is about creating those conditions where people and individuals can thrive. So a great culture, great leadership, great inclusion, great purpose of a company. And HR goes bigger than just being a function. It's really, for me, the heartbeat and the center of the organization. I think most of the applications around AI use relate to people in business, and therefore HR has an outsized role to play, not only in transforming itself, but transforming the company.
Managing a global team is complex, but Deel makes it simpler with payroll, HR, IT, and compliance all in one place. That's why over 35,000 businesses trust Deel to hire, pay, and manage teams worldwide. See how Deel works at deel.com/NICKDAY. That's deel.com/nickday. Deel, your forever people platform. Hello and welcome back to the HR L&D podcast. My name is Nick Day. I'm CEO at JGA Recruitment Group. We are specialist global HR recruiters, and this is the show where we decode the future of people, performance, human resources, and leadership. And today's guest is someone who's been helping HR professionals and teams not just survive, but thrive in this new era, this new age of artificial intelligence, also known as AI. Joining me today is Daniel Strode. Now, he is a globally recognized culture and innovation expert. In fact, to justify this and to prove this case, he was the author of The Culture Advantage and The Innovator's Edge. And he's one of the loudest voices at the moment online, really calling for AI fluency in the HR space. You're in really good hands today. If you're really interested in how AI can infiltrate the world of HR, how we can use it to augment what you're already doing, then hopefully this is going to be a great show for you today. For those not familiar, Daniel has helped organizations across the globe embed innovation and ethical AI into their people practices. And today, hopefully, he's going to help us all cut through the hype and help us to understand what AI really means for the future of HR. We're going to go beyond the buzzwords. We're going to go straight into the strategy. So before we do, welcome Daniel to the HR L&D podcast. How are you feeling?
Really good, Nick. Thanks for such a great introduction, and hopefully I can live up to the expectations.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. Very excited to have you here. Well, listen, let's warm this thing up. Let's start with the first question I ask all of my guests, which is this: what do the words human resources mean to you?
Yeah, brilliant first question. And for me, HR, it means unlocking the full potential of individuals, people within companies, to help businesses achieve what they want to achieve. And for me, human resources at its core is about creating those conditions where people and individuals can thrive. So a great culture, great leadership, great inclusion, great purpose of a company. And HR goes bigger than just being a function. It's really, for me, the heartbeat and the center of the organization and everything that a company wants and needs to do.
So let's dive into that slightly. Is that why you've kind of positioned yourself as an AI expert into the world of HR? Is that where you think you can have the biggest impact, or because HR is that heartbeat, it can really influence so many different facets of an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I've seen in practice is I've seen companies be successful because they've had great people policies and processes and procedures. And I've seen the opposite as well, where companies haven't paid attention to this and they've had great products and services, but not done so well. And for me, that's why I always think HR is absolutely strategic. It is the place where if we make a change, we can help so many people. And that's an interesting challenge for me.
So tell us a little bit about your background, because we've seen AI really being thrust into the world of work at the moment across every single part of an organization, not just human resources, of course. But just a few years ago, this wasn't in our, we weren't talking about it like we are now, and people have been able to pivot very, very cleverly, very quickly. They're evolving processes now, automating processes as well, making things really work and click. What was that moment for you? What point did you go, you know what, this is something that's going to transform the world of work? I want to be at the precipice of the change. I want to help others to do the same. What was that moment for you, that light bulb that said, actually, this is for me. This is how I'm going to really make change in the world of HR?
Probably, I think it was maybe 2.5, 3 years ago where I said, okay, this is now the emerging technology, which is going to change everything that we do in society. And it was at that point I said, okay, HR needs help with this, because I think most of the applications around AI use relate to people in business. And therefore, HR has an outsized role to play, not only in transforming itself, but transforming the company. And I think when we look back at history or through history, and we look at all of the industrial revolutions that have come before, all the technology that has come before, we've got a number of learnings from those. And the learnings always focus on the people and changing the culture and changing the mentality if you want to be successful. And I think for me, it is about purpose and impact, but it would be a lost opportunity if we just started throwing technology into companies and expecting it to work. We need to work on the hearts and the minds as well.
So I think that's interesting. We're definitely going to go deeper into this. I'm just trying to give a bit of a headline view, I guess, of some of the things we've been hearing. And one of those things you've mentioned there is HR is all about people. It's the heartbeat you mentioned as well. It's about purpose. These are all kind of contextual human traits. So it's interesting that we're trying to embed AI, which is really a tool, to, as I say, to augment, to automate processes. How does AI fit into a function that really is all about heartbeat and people and culture and all those human traits that are really difficult actually to replicate through any kind of technological software, certainly at the moment? I think it's quite interesting that we're now talking about how AI is going to massively impact the world of HR, but as you mentioned, it's a very people orientated operation. So how do these two things converge? How do we bring them together?
Yeah, for me, I see it quite like when ATMs were first introduced into the banking industry. Everyone said, oh, the automated teller machine is going to displace jobs and lead to branch closures and so on and so forth. And what we saw actually was the opposite. We saw that the cost to serve a customer was cheaper because of the technology, and it freed up the time of the face-to-face tellers in the branches to go and do high added value transactions with customers. So in the end, the technology was a win-win for everyone. And I see it much the same when it comes to people. I see this as HR's opportunity to become more strategic, to elevate ourselves as a profession and do the deeper work, the more people-focused work, the more leadership work, the individual work, rather than the processes, the automations that it will help us with, the grunt work that actually we don't need to be doing anymore, and it doesn't add huge amounts of value as long as you get it right. And we need to focus on the people skills more than anything else.
And I've seen this in some of the work that you published as well. You talk about the 4 Ps of AI in HR, which are prediction, perception, personalization, and of course, the word you just mentioned there, process automation. Can you give us some real world examples of how each of those is already transforming the world of HR, whether that's hiring, whether talent or engagement, or whether that's workforce planning and organizational development?
Yeah, so I think if you look at it through the process lens, clearly this is the one which is most ripe for automation or augmentation, perhaps. And in payroll, that would be a very strong candidate because there's many administrative tasks. So you could automate some of the reconciliations when it comes to payroll. You could look at job matching and CVs when it comes to recruitment and try to augment some of the human capabilities there with a machine. Then when it comes to the personalization aspect, I think this is the one that's most exciting for HR, is the opportunity to tailor personal experiences for the employees and improve their day-to-day in an individual way. And there's already loads of use cases around chatbots being put into HR so people can have conversations either on skills they need to develop or just help me find these documents that I need for my tax return, whatever that might be. But again, a high touch service there, which is replacing the human. So people have 24/7 access. They have on demand things that they need. And I really see some good information there. And then if I turn to the third one about predictive insight, typically I'm thinking about employee surveys there. How can we look at the data in real time? How can we understand all of the comments employees are leaving us? How do we interpret those results and even extrapolate those into the future? So I'm seeing great use cases looking at employee engagement and matching it with performance to identify who might be at risk of leaving a company and then being able to intervene and help them in their career. And then when I think about the fourth and actually the fifth piece in the whole process, I think about policy and governance. So HR really needing to lead the way on having great ethical policies around the use of AI. We're dealing with huge amounts of personal data and we need to look after that, follow the regulations, and lead by example. So I think that's critical. And the fifth element is quite a new element, and it's the most important element there, which is people and culture transformation. So as I started saying to you at the beginning of the call, the key is to change the hearts and minds of the people. So you need to change HR and the skills we have, the operating model we have, but you also need to help leaders embrace the technology, and you need to give every employee in the organization at least a base level of understanding about AI so they don't feel it as a threat, but rather they see it as something that's going to help them.
I think it's really interesting. Some great examples I've seen in the workplace. You mentioned payroll earlier on in your response, and I saw that EY released some statistics in one of their reports that said that when they introduced their chatbots, efficiency for the payroll department improved by 30%, and that on its own merit sounds great. What I thought was really interesting, though, is the customer satisfaction levels from the employees also went up by 25%. That was kind of a win-win. I think that's because we're starting to get used to the adoption of AI now, where we're getting more familiar with using chatbots as a service. And sometimes actually at work or at home, we don't always want to deal with a human. Sometimes we like the simplicity of a chatbot, being able to be honest with it and ask it and getting used to it. On the flip side, though, I guess I also see things through the hiring lens, and I've got some concerns, certainly. Maybe that's me questioning the change. I don't know, because I'm certainly an AI advocate, and I'm a big believer in it. We can't stop it coming, so we've got to kind of work with it. But I'm also seeing through the recruitment lens a lot of CVs now being created by AI, using the likes of ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it might be to create it, Copilot. And then also AI assessing AI written CVs, and it becomes a homogenized experience. And I think if we're talking a lot about building cultures, I think it's difficult personally, I'm not a fan, as you'll probably get from this, of AI assessing CVs and things coming through. I think it needs a human eye to understand whether straight away I can spot an AI written CV almost immediately, because I've seen so many of them. We manage loads every single day. But I don't think it necessarily caters for those that are neurodivergent in the same way. I think the way that those programs are even set up can often contain personality bias or some other level of bias, where we're trying to find individuals that fit a certain characteristic that actually mirroring has proven not necessarily to be the best way to hire, right? We often need things that are different to what we already have. And I have some interest. I think I need to watch it play out. But I think the one thing I've seen at scale from my side is CVs starting to look more and more and more similar, with the same wordings, the same structure. And I think, okay, it gets harder and harder then to assess talent. And I wonder then, for those that actually take the time to really sit down and write their CVs, are they missing opportunities because the AI is favoring AI written CVs? Now, I bring this up because I know you've got some quite strong views and some really relevant practical tips about managing hype versus and risk, and understanding things like hallucination, data bias, some of the ethical gray areas. So I wondered if you could just maybe bring some of my concerns maybe to the fore, as well as others that you're seeing in the HR space, so we can really understand what we need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think, if we look at it through that lens of what are the risks HR professionals need to be aware of, I would say 3 in particular. One is bias. The second is hallucination, and the third is data and management of that data. So looking to bias, I mean, it's true, every human is biased, the same as the machines are biased, but actually AI is potentially extrapolating that bias because of the way it's trained, the way it's built, and the data that it's generating every day. So exactly as you say, it does lead us to the risk of not really understanding what's going on under the hood. And I think that's the first thing I would warn people about is, if you're implementing AI into any of your business processes, you really need to be able to explain what's happening and why it's happening. And if you can't do that, well, let it be known that the EU directive is coming into play next August. But apart from that, notwithstanding that fact, you need to be ethical and you need to know this. So I would say, don't use AI unless you know how it's been trained, the outcomes, and you can explain that not only to potential candidates, but people inside your company as well. And probably we're going to start seeing candidates asking to companies, how are you making these decisions? What is your policy on this? What is your ethical use of AI? And I think we need to be able to respond to that. And when it does come to bias, of course, you need to be auditing the AI that you're using. You need to be able to explain it, but you need to also be able to have it open so people can give their feedback as well. And I think feedback from candidates, feedback from employees is extremely valuable in this process, because we need to avoid exactly what you say, just CVs all looking the same with the same buzzwords put in there because the machine gives that a great score. And we don't want to lose that human touch. Especially in recruitment, I see it very much a case of how can we augment the process. So I love the AI for setting up meetings, managing the administration, but that's great because that frees up the recruiter to do the hard work of actually getting to know the people and making that judgment. And certainly from the cultural lens, you don't want to be recruiting the same people into the same positions with the same profile. You actually need some diversity there and difference of opinion to make the team stronger. So definitely one to watch is bias. And then hallucinations, exactly the same. So hallucination is when the AI convinces you that something is real when it's not. And it does that in really wonderful ways. It can be extremely persuasive. So we need to be very careful of that. And there's a few hints and tips that you can focus on to reduce the hallucinations. The first is to make sure when you're prompting or when you're asking an AI to do something for you, you give it a very clear set of instructions with very strong rules and guidelines around it. And I always ask the AI not to invent anything. As strange as it seems, just that little phrase does tend to stop it from inventing anything. And then you need to do, of course, the double fact check to make sure what it has told you is true. But that for me is also the same with any human work as well. Some tasks require 100% accuracy, and payroll would be a good example of that. And some tasks don't require 100% accuracy. Maybe 90% is okay, and internal communications might be an example of that. So again, not all tasks are equal, but we need to be aware of that. And the final risk for HR professionals is absolutely huge around the use of business data and personal data. We deal with sensitive data all the time, and we need to make sure that we have either a very clear understanding of what the AI does with the data and how it retains it, and we can explain that, or we need to make the data as anonymous as possible for whichever analysis we need to do. So there's no personal identifying characteristics in that data set. And I think training the workforce on that and sharing those education messages is an absolutely key function of HR as well.
Yeah, it's really good advice. There's a couple of things that come to mind on that. And I haven't fact checked these. These are just conversations I've had. So apologies if this isn't this discoverable out there. I'm just really repeating conversations I've had in person. But I saw on the hallucination side, someone spoke to me about an example that happened. I think it was in the US, where actually in a legal court, someone brought case law to the table that didn't exist. The AI had created it, and it was discovered to be a complete work of fiction. So that's an example there of how far up the line it can go. And I've seen hallucinations work in real time for for content that I've been playing around with, and you see how it fills in those gaps. I think that's really, really interesting. I think the second part, of course, is you mentioned the recruitment piece about how it can augment and improve the work that we do. I spoke to a payroll manager for a local government organisation here in the UK, and in local government, typically, as days gone by, and I've done this for 20 years, you would fill in quite a rigorous application process. There'd be loads and loads of pages of applications. Of course, AI now has sped things up where if you use LinkedIn, you've got the easy apply function. So it's a good thing in the sense that now you place an advert out on LinkedIn or Indeed or wherever it might be, and you'll get more applications you've ever had before in your life, 300, 400, 500 people, because you can play easy apply. It all clicks up, it all connects, it all automates, and you're flooded. But of course, the relevancy of what comes through now, actually, we think it's saving us time. Sometimes it can create the opposite. You've given yourself loads of work now to go through potentially 90-95% of inappropriate applicants because you put it out there. And the individual I was speaking to said, look, Nick, I used to love the old days where we'd only get 5 to 10 applications, but they were, someone had spent hours sitting down, writing their responses, filling in the case studies, all the bits they needed to do. Now we just get flooded, and you don't really know who's fully committed, who's not. And it's just I think it's part of getting used to the experience and understanding how we can make it work for us. But I do find it interesting. And the third point I was thinking of when you were talking about the efficiency element, I spoke to someone, again, I need to fact check this, but they said that apparently AI sort of saves us on the language models about 70% of our writing to create an email, 70% quicker to use AI, and then but apparently it takes 70% longer to edit it. So I don't always know if we're saving time because it comes out in a way that isn't our tone. We then fiddle around with it for so long. The actual time saving isn't as great as we think it is. It's still up there because we spend so long editing and rewriting and making sure it's right for us. Obviously, it's lost time. So I find some of these things interesting. I think a lot of it is, as you say, sort of training the models, getting used to the tools, setting up the parameters, like don't invent anything, which is a great prompt to put in there. I find really interesting. But you mentioned the EU Act, and that's coming into play in August. Tell us a little bit more about that and why we need to be really considerate of what's coming in, particularly as HR professionals. HR leaders. I'm Nick Day, host of this podcast, but also founder of JGA Recruitment Group, And here's what I hear every week from top HR leaders. They say, Nick, we can't find the talent. It's our biggest challenge. And when we do, we can't retain them. Well, that's where we come in. At JGA, we specialize in HR recruitment and only HR recruitment. From executive search assignments placing CHROs to contingency hires finding HR pros to global HR transformational contract placements and every people role in between. Across every vertical and at every single level, we know where the top people are, what motivates them, and most importantly, how to get them excited about your opportunity, even if they're not actively looking. With engagement rates over 90%, we don't rely on job boards. We rely on relationships. We place fast, we place right, and we do it in a way that reflects your brand, your values, and your goals. So if you're building a strategic HR function, please don't leave it to chance. Visit jjrecruitment.com or reach out to me directly and let's build the future of work together.
Yeah, so this will come August 2026 in its entirety, and it is starting now. So some processes are already coming under its purview. And if I look at 3 regions across the world, you basically have the United States, which is just saying innovation first. We're not going to really consider regulation. So go ahead, try things with AI, and we'll see where it lands. You have China, which is really government driven, and they say we want to focus on a specific topic and all of the money goes there and they push things out. And then you have the EU, which is perhaps the most restrictive in terms of its legislation generally in Europe, but then specifically for AI as well. And the Act is very, very robust. It basically says that companies using AI need to be using AI in a fair and responsible manner. They also need to reduce bias where possible and mitigate risk across their organizations and the way they use it. And finally, they need to pay attention to privacy of data as well. So really those 3 risks around bias, hallucinations, and business data fall in or under the EU directive. But the key thing here is human resources is touching employee data, personal data, data related to salaries, data related to promotion opportunities and performance. And that is very, very sensitive data. So the majority of processes which AI is going to touch within HR, be that ranging from payroll to promotions to succession planning, all the way through to leaving a company and the survey you might do, they are high risk categories as defined by the directive. And what that means is the company needs to have certain policies and processes in place. It needs to have governance around its use of AI, and it needs to be ready to talk to third parties who could audit the use of AI in the companies. And at the moment, there's no indication of what size companies this relates to. At the moment, it relates to every single company, and the fines can be absolutely astronomical for non-compliance. So everyone needs to be paying attention to this. Of course, my hunch is the large firms will be the one who are under the most scrutiny when it's fully in place in 2026. But just because you're an SME doesn't mean you can't pay attention to this, and you have to follow responsible and ethical use of AI. And at the core, I really think as long as you are talking about AI use, you are socializing it in your company, you are having some level of governance, and you are being open and honest with your employees and candidates about what you're using it for, I think you'll broadly speaking be successful in compliance, but it will become more rigorous over time.
Fantastic. Now, I don't want to encourage the Wild West here, but when this kicks into play in August 2026, can they go back? Is there any retrospective action here? Because obviously language models have been in place now for some time. There may be companies, large or small, that have been putting in personal data, not realizing that's a problem, not realizing how open source works, and realizing that maybe that data becomes accessible, but are now panicking. So is it anything from August onwards, or can they still look backwards?
Yeah, we're not really clear yet on if there's going to be retrospective action. I personally think that it's quite unlikely there would be, because this is a new frontier and the typical rules come into effect on a specific date, and they shouldn't look backwards. But what I would say is lead by example, be ethical in your use, and then at least you'll have a very strong defense if it was the case that you needed to defend or prove anything. And I think actually that's the way to do business in general. That's the way to
Great.
lead as an HR leader. Like, we have a responsibility to our employees. We're here to protect them as much as we are to help support the company. And I think let's lead with ethics. Let's be the ones who set the boundaries. And also, just because you're in the US, China, or Europe and you have different legislations doesn't mean anything. I think we need to be the ones who are driving the direction here and driving the use and saying what is and what is not acceptable. And if we do that and we have a position, we can also influence the regulations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I did a talk recently about the future sort of role titles that may exist. There's lots of studies out there that say, a lot of the roles we have now won't exist in 2030, and 85% of positions don't exist yet either. So I was talking about the potential of there being roles such as a chief ethical officer within an organization that's really focused on looking at data and making sure it's unbiased, and some of the things you talked about today. We've seen that AI has really changed the nature of work, which means it's also changed the nature of human resources as well. So with that in mind, what are some of the new roles, skills, capabilities, competencies that you think are going to be required and we need to start either training for or looking out for in the next generation of HR team for the future?
Definitely. I think HR is about to go through a really, really radical change in that respect. And I would probably say two things. One is I would see the operating model changing of HR teams. So I would see that we have an operational layer as the foundation of HR. So that is our transactional processing. That is making sure that we're doing things 100% accurate with high quality and so on and so forth, and managing the employee lifecycle on an operational basis. On the top layer, I would see strategic HR. And here is all the efficiencies that we gain from technology. We elevate ourselves, we become closer to the business, we serve our customer better, we know their needs, and we really act as strategic business partners. And then more or less the new or enhanced layer is somewhere in the middle, which I think is going to be the technological layer. So that is the self-service, that is the 24/7 capacity and capability that employees have to interact with the company. So if I think of it through those lenses or that new operating model, I would say there's some key skills that HR professionals will need now and in the future. And the first is to be tech savvy. I mean, you have to know technology, you have to play with this stuff, you have to experience it. And it doesn't matter what role you're in, there is a level of transformation happening, and you need to embrace that. I would say we need to improve our strategy skills as well. So instead of just being reactive, we need to be proactive. We need to understand where the business is heading and what we can do to help support that before things happen. So tech, a bit on strategy. And then I would also say we need to double down on employee experience and really thinking about the employee journey. A big fear I have with all the technology coming into the market, and we've seen it with Workday, we've seen it with Salesforce, we've seen it with some of the big HCMs, is you get something that's plug and play, but it's not tailored to your organization, and that causes frustration and tension in the process. So we need to take care of the people as individuals, because we do that for our customers. We treat you as an individual, as a customer, so we need to do the same with our employees. And then the final couple of things I would say is we need data mastery at the core of what we do. I really think HR can lead with data, lead on decision making. And again, that elevates us to become a bit more strategic. And the final thing is around change management. I think we're in a constant flux of change, and the people and the companies who are successful are the ones who will implement the change in the appropriate way and talk about that change, explain the reasons why we're doing that, and bring people on the journey and ultimately make a more successful change than just trying again to throw something in and say, go and get on with it.
Yeah, fantastic. I actually read one of your posts. I think it says something along the lines of data fluency is no longer really optional for HR. It's almost like the new HR superpower, right? We need that data literacy, that technical literacy as well, which, as you said, enables HR professionals to be more strategic, which I think is what most of them want to be able to do, really partner organizations to drive purposeful change. And talking about the change, culture change is something else that's happening in the age of automation. You've spent your whole career helping organizations to navigate that change. So if I'm an CHRO listening to this, HR director, how can HR help build a culture where both humans and AI can coexist in a way that protects trust, protects well-being, protects inclusion, and all the things in between?
Yeah, I've been preaching this message about embracing technology for so many years, way before AI became the popular topic. And that's because the world is becoming more digital. I always say if Charles Darwin was alive right now, he'd probably say it was survival of the clickiest. So the one who
Nice.
could click the fastest or whatever that might mean. But I think, typically HR has the role, as I say, to transform itself, improve our skills, improve our capability, but then we have to lead and help the company change as well. And in terms of culture, I typically think that you always need to start with the leaders of the organization there. Of course, the culture can be built ground up and should be built ground up, but if you don't have the leaders on board and actively role modeling those behaviors, um, nothing will change. So, what's the type of culture you need in this century? Probably you need leaders who have this type of cyborg mindset. So, this willingness to partner with technology, to see that the technology is an extra tool for them, an added benefit to what they do. It doesn't replace their teams, it augments them, it helps them get better and have better results. So I think learning to manage people and machines side by side is an absolutely critical cultural change that needs to happen. And then across the whole organization, from the cultural lens, you need that literacy in AI as a basic minimum or whatever the new emerging technology is. So that again, people don't think that this is coming to replace their jobs, but you sell them on the value that it brings them. And, Atlassian did some wonderful research which actually showed that those who were using AI in a strategic manner were saving 105 minutes every working day in their tasks. Now, this was very strategic profiles doing strategic thought processing work, not necessarily operational work. But if you're saving that time, they then asked, what do you do with that time? And most of the employees said that they were investing that extra time in learning new skills. So that's really important that you also create a culture of learning in your company. And I'm afraid for the companies that don't create that culture of learning and build that mental muscle of taking on new information and trying new things, they'll be left behind quite fast.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. You always create an extra day for yourself that you can, over the course of a week, you can dedicate, as you say, wholly to learning new skills that can benefit both yourself. And we know that's a huge impact to retention and improving employee retention and as a result, productivity, happiness, motivation, but also improving company performance. So it seems like a win-win from that perspective. Also, I mentioned at the start in my introduction, you've written the author of The Culture Advantage and The Innovator's Edge. But with that, you also have created the Innovator's Edge card deck, which I believe helps organizations to push boundaries, to unlock culture transformation. Can you share a little bit about the book and also about how some of those tools can really help drive change in a real HR context?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I love the concept of the innovator's edge. It came about after researching hundreds of companies, going to visit the best companies around the globe and understanding what they were doing to drive culture in their organizations. And so it's a card deck, 52 cards with over 100 pieces of advice on the reverse of them. And they're split into 5 categories. So some treat leadership, some treat diversity, some treat process in a company. And basically, you can put them out on the table either as a team or as an individual. Whenever you're stuck or you need to release some tension, flip a few cards over, create millions of possibilities, and just work through either the examples, case studies, exercises on there. They're all very bite sized, they're all things that are extremely practical. So, for example, you might find one, and one of my favorites is the failure CV or the failure resume. You flip it over and it says, speak to a colleague about 3 things you failed with in either your personal or professional life, but reflect upon how that made you a better person. And I think sometimes just doing those exercises and thinking through those lenses really help. And I'm really proud of them. I've seen companies, thousands embracing these card decks and using them either in their workshops or their day to day and getting great results. So I do encourage people to check those out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think with the power of reflection and the power of curiosity are two massively undervalued attributes or skills to have. We have this I have it regularly, this AI conversation on all the different shows that I produce on the podcast side of things. And obviously it's a hot topic. I often say to individuals, even if you're concerned about AI, think about what you're doing now in your job role and what you were doing 2-3 years ago, and then really reflect on how that role has changed, because AI has snuck up on us. in lots of ways. The way we unlock our phones, these things just kind of start to happen in relation to biometrics or something else. You think, oh, okay, actually, embracing that change was pretty easy for me, and it does make it easier to unlock my phone or to pay something with my phone or with my iWatch or whatever it might be. It's sometimes that does sneak up on us, and if you reflect a little bit on what you were doing before and learn from the failures of the past, which is obviously the learning journey for the future, actually you can really start to unlock some really strong insights on how how you're already managing the change. Change is constant. I think we sometimes feel that AI is there's going to be a line in the sand, and AI is going to hit us now, and now we've got to be ready. Like it's already there, it's already happening. It's just move with the flow, because you can't stop it. As you know, the momentum is building. It's getting clever all the time. I think your insights today have been really fascinating and hopefully incredibly helpful for the HR professionals that are listening to this show. My last question before we open the HR L&D Vault for you, Daniel, is this: is there something I haven't asked around the world of HR and AI today that you think would be really pertinent for our listeners to hear, to know, or have we covered most of the content? That's something you want to leave them with a message of how they can help embrace the future?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of great stuff. And one of the reflections I'm having whilst we're talking is actually just because we've got a process that works in a certain way today doesn't mean we have to do exactly the same process in the future with AI helping us. And I think that's an important reflection, because just because we process numbers in a certain way on an Excel spreadsheet doesn't mean we have to ask the machine to do the same. And I think it gives us the opportunity to rethink HR, rethink the value we can give to the business, and rethink the speed at which we work at as well. And I think when you combine all of that, the fact that you've got people being more strategic, you've got machine to help you go faster, and you have the opportunity to change things, you have quite a powerful combination. And I think the best companies will be the ones that experiment, take risks, take chances when it comes to this technology, and try things, test and learn. And that's the mentality for me that's going to set the winners and the losers apart, is the fact that you do take risk and you do test and learn things.
Couldn't agree more. I love that. I did a keynote talk last week on the future of payroll. It's an interesting, we talked about payroll a little bit today on today's show, but it's an interesting concept, because the idea of payroll really is we're paying our staff accurately, on time, compliantly, every single week, month, by week, whatever it is your pay frequency might be. And you get payroll professionals saying, Nick, why do we change anything? Our accuracy rates are perfect, it's working. I said, if you stay the same and you don't consider how it's going to evolve, everything will evolve around you. And I think one thing to note on that instance is how much payroll is now immersed in the employee experience. People want more transparency about how they're paid. They want to understand their pay slips. They may want to be paid instantly using earned wage access or pay on demand. And actually, if you don't adopt those processes, those employees will leave and go to someone that will. And then before you know it, you'll look up and realize you've got a retention problem. You're still paying people accurately and on time, but people don't want to work for you. And it's you've got to be able to look at not just your existing process and whether or not that needs to evolve, but if you don't, be mindful that everything around you may evolve, even if you don't. And before you know it, you're out of pace. And I think there was a moment in the room when I brought it to the table, everyone, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because employees are always demanding more from their pay, not just getting paid accurately. They want to get it paid in different ways. The future will probably be they don't want to just get paid in fiat currency. Maybe they want to be paid some in digital wallets or need some other kind of mechanism. And it's being very mindful of what we're there to do, which is support our organizations to grow, attract the best staff, retain the best staff, be productive. And I think the insight you've just left there about always being open to it is absolutely right. That's going to allow you to always maintain that competitive advantage in a very competitive world that we're already in and continuing to move into. Fantastic. Well, listen, let's open the HR L&D Vault. 3 short, sharp questions for you. A bit of a bonus round for our listeners. The first question is this: one piece of advice you would give to an HR or L&D leader navigating AI implementation.
Oof. It does touch upon what I just said, but I think experiment and try things. Don't be afraid of that at all. Experiment, test things fast, fail faster, and learn from that, and just keep trying. And definitely do listen to the voice of your customer. And that's why we're here. We're here to serve. We're not here to make ourselves look good. We're here to respond to the needs of our employees. And for me, that's where we have to put our focus.
Fantastic. Absolutely right. Number 2, one cultural shift you'd love to see more of in organizations today.
I would probably love companies to stop thinking of HR as a process or the things that we do as processes, and rather think of us as a strategic partner, an opportunity to gain extra insight, extra value into the business. So stop looking to HR as the younger sibling and the one that just does execution of tasks, but rather look at us as an equal partner at the table who can add massive transformational value to the companies.
Perfect. And last but by no means least, a little bit of fun. If HR or even workplace culture in this perspective was a book, a movie, or a song right now, and you had to frame it, what would it be and why?
Do you know, I watched it recently, so I'm going to say Hidden Figures. This was the story of the Afro-American females in NASA in the 1960s who really helped NASA win through the space race. And I think oftentimes HR is pretty unseen in the organization unless something goes wrong or someone wants to complain. But actually, the work we do has to be precise. It powers the company that we sit behind, and the value is really immeasurable. So we feel a little bit hidden at times, but it need not be the case. We do add value, and we need to continue shouting about that as well.
I think that's a great example and a brilliant way to round off the show. I hope everyone that's listened has really enjoyed today's conversation. I hope you've all taken away Daniel's insights, and that really AI, it's not a threat to HR. It's a chance for HR to really become more human, more strategic partners. I think we mentioned a couple of times on today's show, and more future fit than ever. I think if we can really combine the best of data, the best of people, then HR leaders are really going to be able to stay relevant. They're really going to help to purposely drive their organizations forward. So Daniel Strode, thank you ever so much for sharing your wisdom, your frameworks, your experience, your insights with our audience today. It's been a really fascinating conversation that I'm sure is going to help propel all of our listeners forward in their HR career. So thank you ever so much for joining me on the HR L&D podcast.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And of course, if you have enjoyed the show, please do remember to click subscribe. Please do like the show, share it with all of your HR colleagues and friends. We want to raise the profile of human resources and people management across the globe. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please do leave us a review. Please do follow us. Please do like us on whatever your favorite podcast or indeed YouTube. We're on videos as well if that's your preferred platform. But stay in touch, and we'll look forward to bringing the next episode real soon. Daniel, thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Global teams are more connected than ever. But managing payroll, HR, and IT can still feel fragmented. Deel simplifies global work with one platform that keeps everything running smoothly. No compliance guesswork, no third-party payroll, just seamless operations backed by 24/7 expert support. That's why over 35,000 companies trust Deel to handle their global workforce. Visit deel.com/nickday to see how Deel can help. That's DEEL.com/NICKDAY. Deel, your forever people platform.